Thomas, with today I'm going to address the about the calendar, the church calendar, both kind of some of the practicalities of what we use it for, and then also some maybe the controversies that surround it. So to begin with, a calendar is just functions as a marking the day, right? It's a way to follow and mark time. But for us Orthodox Christians, we should be living our life around the Orthodox calendar because it does mark our ecclesiastical time. So it provides kind of a rhythm to our life, the church calendar. It tells us about the fasting cycles, the feast day cycles, and it guides our obediences in worship. And it keeps a continuity of our social life together as Orthodox Christians. Okay? It keeps us together, grounded together, all on the same page. So the calendar is very important for us. So the calendar consists of a series of daily feasts. So each day we commemorate a feast day in the church. Every day has a commemoration of a saint or some kind of historical event that of some importance in the church. So we remember those daily in the church. So the calendar that we use in the Orthodox Church, it begins, the new year starts September 1st. September 1st, okay? So we've inherited this from Jewish worship, where September 1st, on how we reckon September 1st, is the start of the new year. So whenever we start our calendar, it'll be the indication of the year is September 1st, and that's when we start a whole new cycle, and we repeat it year after year, always on September 1st, okay? So the church is, as far as feast days on the calendar, we commemorate each of these feasts each day, but there's specific feasts that are more important than other feasts. We call them the great feasts of the church. And these are days of, well, we don't use this term day of obligation like in the Western church, but I don't know any other way to put it. It should be an obligation in your life. If you're truly faithful to the church, it should be an obligation to you. But we don't consider it, say, a sin to have been able to not make it as into your worship day. So that's we start again. We just started in our calendar. We're on the old calendar, and I'll talk about that a little bit. We just started the church calendar this week. So the feast of the Nativity of Theotokos is the first big feast of the year. Okay, and we celebrate that on Tuesday, and then we go into the elevation of the cross. That's on this September 14th. The presentation of the Theotokos into the temple, that's November 21st. And we have the Nativity of Christ, Christmas, December 25th. Theophany, the baptism of Christ, the 6th of January. The presentation of the Lord in the temple, February 2nd. Annunciation is the March 25th. Transfiguration of the Lord, August 6th. And then the Dormition, we just ended our year with the biggest feast as the Dormition of the Theotokos on August 15th. So these are immovable feasts, we call them. So they fall on that day. They will always be that day. Always on that day. Okay? Regardless of anything that's going on in the church, those feasts are commemorated that day. We also have feasts that are movable feasts. So they're not fixed to a certain day on the calendar. They're fixed based upon when Easter was celebrated, and we'll get into how we calculate that. But Easter is different each year. It's on a different date. It's not on a set date. And so the feasts that follow Easter are always going to be different. So, Palm Sunday comes the week before, and then we have the Ascension of the Lord 40 days after, and Pentecost 50 days after. Okay? So those are called immovable feasts. And then we have 4 fast cycles of the year that coincide with these. So Great Lent, the Great Fast, and then the Apostles' Fast that comes right after we're done with Pentecost season. It's always revolving around Easter. So those change every year. But then we also have the Nativity Fast and the Dormition Fast that are connected to fixed date feasts. So they always start on a certain day. Okay? So we have lots of feasts and lots of fast. We are a calendar church. It's a liturgical time. We keep time. And then we have to remember all these dates Because this is my house is operating different than your house, okay? My family and I do things different than your family. It's just natural. But what's going to bind us together is our faith and then our psyche, and then keeping all these things, remember, together, right? We have that in common. No matter how we run our household, we should have that in common. And so this is how important the calendar is. It makes us Christians together. We have a central point of consistency in our lives between Christian to Christian. Okay? That's how important the calendar is. So the feast of all, what we know is Pascha, it's Easter. As a Christian, there's no other greater feast. And so this is kind of, it's complicated how we calculate Easter. Every year we just always look at the calendar. Oh, there's Easter. We never know when it's going to be, we have to look it up, right? So Easter, in the early church, there was kind of some controversies over when to celebrate the Lord's resurrection, okay? There's people who always did it on a certain day, just like a fixed feast. Always did it on a certain day, okay? But what happens is if it's on a certain day, it's not necessarily going to be on a Sunday, right? Kind of odd that we would celebrate the resurrection outside of a Sunday. And there's other people that said, no, it had to be this Sunday. So there's multiple ways people for hundreds of years were celebrating Easter. So at the First Council of Nicaea in the year 325, they took up this issue. And they came together and they said, we're going to celebrate, everyone has to celebrate this feast together. Okay, it was very important. It would be together. No more local traditions and variations. And then it was going to be according to four things. So Pascha, 1, would always be after the vernal spring equinox. So that's in mid-March, right? 2, it would follow but not coincide with the first full moon of spring. So it has to be after after the equinox. And it has to be on or after the first full moon, after the equinox. Always has to be on a Sunday. And then there's also this is putting to bed some kind of a misunderstanding out there. They said that it has to be after Passover, the Jewish Passover, which is wrong. It says we don't depend on the Jewish Passover at all to calculate this. It just always happens generally to be after Jewish Passover based upon those other criteria. But it doesn't matter when Passover is. Okay, so those four criteria are how we get. And so they used it in Alexandria. That's where they used the calculated vernal in Alexandria, Egypt. And they have a Paschalian, which is just a calendar. So they've had these, and they used a formula to calculate these out. So we know for years in advance exactly when Pascha will be that year based upon the calculations of the full moon and the spring equinox. Okay? So why what?
Why does it have to be after the first full moon and the vernal equinox?
Well, because Passover was calculated by a lunar cycle.
Okay.
Yeah. And so they're not saying we don't follow Passover, because actually Passover a couple times changed. They changed their calendar. Jewish calendar changed a little bit since the time of Christ. So Passover was always done by calculating. The Jewish calendar was a lunar calendar. So this is why they used these methods. Yeah. So let's get more into a little bit more of kind of a tougher thing to comprehend. All right. So what's confusing about the church calendar, especially here, say the diaspora, those outside the traditional walls of where Eastern Orthodoxy was always raised. So here in America, that's where we're at. Let's talk about that. So there are two calendars that the Orthodox churches uses here in America. Okay. There's in use the Julian calendar, also known as the Old Calendar. And there's the revised Julian calendar. That's also known, we just say we call it the New Calendar. So these two calendars, they celebrate the fixed, immovable, not all the great feast days that are fixed on the same day. All those dates that I said, we all celebrate them on that day. But chronologically, the Julian calendar is 13 days later behind the new calendar. Okay, so we'll talk about what that means. Whereas like Pascha and all those feasts associated it, since we have to celebrate Pascha together, we celebrate it together. So they're all the same day, chronologically. You're going to be on the same day every year. Pascha, Palm Sunday, Ascension, and Pentecost. Always will be the same because we're not following a fixed date on it. Okay, it's based on Pascha, and we're all doing Pascha together. All right. So how did this come about? Why and how? Okay. So the year 1582 was important. It's a long time ago, over 500 years ago, right? Almost can be 500. 1582, the Roman Catholic Church, we're celebrating just like the rest of the Western world with the Eastern Orthodox. Everybody was had the same reckoning of dates. Unfortunately, the Julian calendar, was named after Julius Caesar, by the way, who came up with it. You know, it was during his. He didn't come up with it, but his scientists, they developed that calendar under his time in power. That calendar was starting to become is a little bit off. Okay, astronomically, it's a little bit off. So the Julian calendar. Was based on an average of 365 and a quarter days. That's how they calculated days under the Julian calendar, okay? But it was actually 365.2422 days. You see how, so it's slightly off. So when you imagine it slightly off over centuries and centuries and centuries, are the astronomical calendar, based on that, it starts deviating a long time. So the Roman Catholic Church put out the fix. They said, well, let's fix the astronomical calendar. And they came up with what's called the Gregorian calendar, based on Pope Gregory's institution. And so they fixed the calendar astronomically at that point. It's still a little off, actually, but they fixed it. They corrected it. And basically what they did to catch it up is they sliced, how many days do you think off the calendar? 13 days off the calendar. 13 days. So you can imagine what a pious Orthodox believer said. What? I can't celebrate all these feast days for they just cut them off. They basically just cut them off for 13 days to catch it up. So they did not. None of the Orthodox at that time accepted this change. And in fact, we already had the Protestant Reformation at this point. So even people in America were not following the Gregorian calendar. You can actually there's people in Appalachia that celebrate. They call it Old Christmas because. Even in America, they were celebrating still under Julian calendar. You can find this. The Amish do this. They call it Amish Christmas. It's interesting. We're not the only ones with this anomaly. We're just happen to be the biggest that has this anomaly. So none of the Orthodox picked this up. None of them picked it up at that time. Okay. However, in 1923, so that's close to 400 years later, Patriarch Meletius, he's the ecumenical patriarch at the time. He wanted to fix it, and in order to he knew that not everyone's going to go along with it. So at their synod, they came up with the revised Julian calendar, saying, well, we'll do the fixed feast date on the Gregorian calendar, and we'll use the Julian calendar for Pascha. And so that's what we got is revised Julian calendar. So over time, some of the local churches accepted that as the calendar. Okay, so why did they change it? I don't think it was to be astronomically correct. I think it was because it was a convenience. Most civil countries at that time were using the Gregorian calendar, and so they can line up church holy days with civil days, and it was all made sense, right? It was easier. It was more of a convenience. And also, I think that there was this wish by Meletius, if you knew who he was. He did have an interest in having closer ties with the Catholic Church, okay, who was already using this calendar, okay? So that's what it was. So what's the result of this? So the Julian calendar, old calendar, the churches of Jerusalem, Russia, Serbia, Georgia, Poland, the monastery in Sinai, Ukraine, the church in Japan, and the monastic communities of Mount Athos all continue to use old calendar for their feast days, fixed feast days. Whereas the churches of Constantinople, Alexandria, Antioch, Romania, Bulgaria, Cyprus, Greece, Albania, the Czech lands, and Estonia, and the OCA used the revised Julian calendar. And I should say that there's some churches here in America under Constantinople and OCA that still use the old calendar. They've still kept it intact. So they have people under both. I can imagine being a bishop having two calendars to worry about. So it's basically split among churches, but the vast mass majority, because of the size of the Russian church and the Serbian church, is under old calendar in the world, just because it's the biggest church. So population-wise, old calendars, but as far as the amount of churches that use it, it's kind of almost evenly split. Okay, so that's why we have two calendars that we follow. Okay, as an aside, the Church of Finland follows a Gregorian calendar all straight through, which is it's an anomaly, and it's because of from what I understand, a national law. They have to by law, and they're in the country of Finland. They all on the same calendar with all the Protestant groups. So that's what they use. It's an anomaly. So Finland, yeah. So okay. All right, so I'm going to read. I wrote down some notes here about the calendars, and then we can open up for discussion. But I want to talk about these two different calendars, okay? Because I don't find this as big of an issue today, but it used to be a very big issue, big controversy. These two calendars caused lots of controversy in the church this past century due to disagreements of a perceived disunity among Orthodox. But it should be said that it did not break communion between local churches. No grace was lost by implementing the new calendar, as some extremists might say. So because you celebrate these feasts on a different day doesn't make you non-Orthodox. Okay, there are some schismatic groups that will say that, but that's not the case. So this is my opinion. I'm talking Father Michael's opinion. Okay, so. The new calendar was established as a matter of convenience to align church holidays with civil dates. I also think that there was a wish to have Christians celebrate historic feast days together so that ecumenical relations were easier. But this was at the expense of Orthodox cohesion. In reality, it has been my pastoral experience that few people today make a fuss about calendar differences aside from a few zealots, except around Christmas. Okay. Most fixed date feasts get left uncelebrated by the laity. Nativity, the Feast of Nativity being the exception to that rule. This may be a good or a bad thing depending on your formation and preference. Some like to celebrate Nativity lockstep with the world around them. It feels comfortable. Like everyone else is doing it, so this feels like Christmas. And some people that have converted to Orthodox Trinity might find the new calendar reform to be useful as a convenient bridge to them to approach Orthodoxy. Okay, it's like they don't have to change anything they've done in the past except for Pascha. Okay. However, others like the ability to worship the feast, especially Nativity, separate from the now over-secularized version of it that has already ended. Certainly, Orthodox do this with regard to Easter already, right? How many of us enjoy getting all the Easter sales, right? Already, right? So, further, there are some issues that are glaring. Okay, this is where I put on my liturgics hat. There are some issues that are glaring besides the lack of a feast day unity. The liturgical rubrics of all the feasts of the church were put into place assuming that we all follow the old calendar, the Julian calendar. It was written way before we changed, okay? So the shift of 13 days, that just cutting off and changing to 13 days, has some repercussions. So on the revised calendar, there's some of these liturgical anomalies. So for instance, do we know what the 40 Martyrs of Sebastian is, that feast? It's a big feast, actually, but it falls during Lent, or should. And the hymnography of that feast always is talking about the asceticism of the 40 martyrs. These are the ones who went and were on the lake, the ice lake, and they froze, right, as a witness to their martyrdom. They were all soldiers. But all the hymnography tells us that we need to endure the fast and work hard to the coming of the Pascha. And so that makes sense when the feast falls during the fast. But unfortunately, under the new calendar, most often it falls before fast even begins, before the fast, because of the calendar shift, 13 days. Okay, so that's one anomaly. Another anomaly that you guys know is that the Apostles' fast, which starts the day after All Saints, which is the ending after the Pentecost, right? Since the 13 days are cut off, that fast on the new calendar will always be 13 days short. And in some instances, based on when Pascha is, they cut it out, it's cut off completely. No, it's though actually one of the oldest fasts we have in the church, the Apostles' fast. The fast that no one likes to do because it's in summer, at the beginning of summer. But it's the oldest fast. And so in the new calendar, some days, some weeks, I think this year they had 1 day. They had a fast. 1 day. 1 day. So this is a liturgical anomaly that can't be fixed by just slicing off 13 days and say we're good. Now, so for all these 19 centuries that this is the church has always celebrated this way, it can't be celebrated anymore. It's done. It's gone. Okay. So those are some of the issues with the calendar. There's many others actually, but just to give you a couple of easily understood ones. So it seems to me that the calendar question, how do we approach this? We should avoid extremes, right? Extreme opinions on this, okay? Although the change to the Gregorian calendar for fixed days, feasts, may be unthinkable to kind of a vast majority of Orthodox throughout the world, we should be tolerant of it. And likewise, for those who celebrate in the new calendar should be tolerant of those who celebrate in the old calendar. And we should not refuse to go to another Orthodox church based solely on the calendar issue, right? I'm always been a member of the Russian Orthodox Church. This is what I'm ordained in. And I went to seminary at a new calendar church in the OCA. I double dipped every feast. I doubled the feast. I doubled it for 3 years. So I got all my feast days in twice because I was assigned to a Russian church to go to serve at those services. And I had to be at the monastery for those feast days because I was a seminarian there. So I doubled it up. So some people I know that would be hard for some people to wrap their head about, because you're doing things twice. I don't recommend it. But my point being is you shouldn't be like avoiding a church. This is the thing of the past. We got to get over that. Okay. I don't know that we're ever going to have it fix this issue at this point. It's been a century since a lot of the churches kind of incorporated it in now. A century. 100 years almost going to be. And those who haven't picked it up at the Church of Russia, I don't ever see the Serbians, the Georgians. They're very traditionally based. They're never going to change it. I just don't see it at a time, not any time in my life, at least. So we're going to have to just get used to this idea that we're on separate calendars, okay? So the reason I talked about this is because I know for some people who are new to Orthodoxy, it's confusing. The calendar issue is confusing. Pascha, Easter, why don't we celebrate Easter? So why is Easter different? Let's get to your question, your comment. So, Paschal moon, how is that calculated? And how is our Easter and Paschal moon calculated? Yeah. Well, because you were talking about how do you spoke like you knew, like
it was calculated exactly the way you said.
Mm-hmm. Which one, though?
What do you mean?
So the Paschal moon has nothing to do with Passover, right? Should have nothing to do. Yeah. So what happens oftentimes, this is why we have Easter so far apart from, some days, some years we may have it identical. It's because they are still using the Gregorian calendar to calculate the vernal equinox, which is much more accurate than ours. Right? We're off. We know we're off. Astronomically, we're off. We are off. The Julian calendar is off astronomically. So we have to wait 2 years before, or 2 weeks before the full moon. So we might get a full moon after the equinox according to the Gregorian calendar, right? We may have to wait another 6 weeks before it comes again. And so the lunar cycles don't always add up the right way. It's just way off. So
I'm thinking when you said you celebrated
Uh-huh.
Do you know about Papa Nicholas? What was it he said?
He said new calendar by obedience and old calendar by by choice or something like that. Yeah. So, yeah, he was. She's talking about a saint in Greece that at the time of the change, of course, there was a big, even today there's still churches that are not in communion with the Greek church because over this. He was a priest that he said he celebrated both. He celebrated both feasts, and he said, "I do the new calendar under obedience but under conviction, but the old calendar by conviction." Yeah, that's his question. So how did any questions? We've over the last couple of years we've had a lot of new people come to our church. We follow the church, the calendar. Again, I think the new calendar it's good for out of convenience because we get certain days like Christmas. I think, in my opinion, and this is my soapbox here, no one cares about the calendar until Christmas rolls around, and that's just the truth. That's the truth of the matter. So people that make a big deal out of it, I tell them, it says, you're not in church for any of the feasts. I know you're not, except for Christmas. And then you're going to try to make a big deal out of it, So Christmas seems to be the anomaly because it's a big feast. And and to not do it with the rest of the world, some people have gotten accustomed to doing it. My opinion is I like it on the old calendar because I don't want my kids growing up with the secular Christmas, they don't enter into the spirit of the feast day at all. When everyone around them is really focused on, the gift giving aspect of Christmas and the partying of Christmas. There's no time just to actually fast, which we're supposed to do, and relax and think about the Advent, the coming of Christ. So we can do that under the old calendar because a lot of that celebration is left behind, and we can focus on what the meaning of the feast is, right? The feast. And calendars changed a lot. We used to celebrate the feast of Theophany and Christmas used to be together on the 6th of January. Always was. And then it separated we're going to do Nativity on the 25th. Some churches, like the Armenian church, still do it on the 6th. They do both together. You could see the history that they kept that. They didn't separate those feasts up because there was supposed to be both the theophany, the coming of God on this earth, and that's what both the Epiphany is and Christmas is. So it was always this like dual feast, and it still is. If you look at all the hymnography, it's just like a do-over. Theophany is like the do-over of Christmas, and in the way we do all the rubrics of the church, it really is. So we separated the dates out at some point in history. So there is some precedent that things have changed over time, but. By the time the Gregorian calendar was established in the West, our rubrics were pretty much set in stone, and that's where the problems came in. So to change the calendar at this point would mean we have to change all the liturgics and all the rubrics, and that's where for some it's just they can't reconcile themselves to do that. So, yeah. Any questions? How about you? Your family's always been in the Greek church. You guys ever have some of your old parishioners remember the old calendar?
They do.
Yeah.
Yeah. But for the most part, they're all...
Yeah. I think it's been 100 years. Yeah, it's going on almost 100 years. Yeah. Did any of you have any issues with how was it doing an old calendar Christmas crystals this year? Different? Yeah.
Both, but
Yeah.
it's hard to do both.
Yeah. It's hard.
On the fasting days and Christmas and then,
Yeah. Okay.
I just think, this is just comment, I think children today have it very difficult because all the kids in school and everything getting ready for Christmas, but yet there's us, which is fine because I was very fortunate in my little circle of 5 girlfriends, 3 of us were Orthodox. The teachers knew from kindergarten all the way through school, they're not going to be in school, especially like Good Fridays or, the holidays. I thought I was very fortunate in that other people understood this, that it's a holiday. But anyway, I think it's hard for kids to comprehend this, that we're not celebrating on the 25th. But anyway.
Our kids do. Maybe the other kids. So, I look at, not in kind of a way, the Muslims and the Jews in a way. And anyone who's non-Christian, really, they don't follow the secular calendar for their feast days. They got a totally different calendar. No one looks at them cross-eyed because they're celebrating a feast on that doesn't coincide with their Gregorian calendar. No one. In fact, we look at them. I look at some of them with a lot of respect because they don't have to follow the lockstep with the rest of the world, right? They're faithful to their traditions, So it's almost a way of being to make our. I think it's okay to be different. Actually, is what I'm trying to say. I think we should be different, and we should have the courage to be different and to live out that difference because it'll call attention that we are different. We should be living different. If we're all Orthodox and we claim to be Orthodox and we claim to be the fullness of the Christian faith, and I think we should look a little different than the rest of the Christian world, so to speak, and the civil world especially. So it's okay to be different. It's okay to do things differently. That's how I see it. But I live my life as a priest, so I'm always like different. I'm used to being looking at being strange sometimes, but our people maybe not so much. But I think it's good for you. I think we should live out our lives so that we, why you do that? It's a good point to talk for people to ask you why. Great. Right? When else do we have the opportunity, to talk about it?
Do
Right?
your kids feel that way? Because my kids grew up being old calendar, and they, I think for them it was a little bit difficult, like she's saying, to be different. But they also liked the separate celebration. Once the whole Christmas rush was over, then we, going to church for an activity and being all that we were there for was very special to them. And my son, even when he kind of, was young and drifted away, he would still come for nativity just because it was very...
Yeah, similar experience. Our kids, have grown up in our old calendar, and then we came here. We had one Christmas on the new calendar, and they would always say, "Oh, everyone else has Christmas today." On the 25th, everyone has Christmas today, and they would be a little bit melancholy about it. And then one year we celebrated on that day, and they're like, they missed their old traditions. They missed their old way, the customs. And so when we went back, they were so excited again, So I think you get used to it. You see around you that you wish you kind of be like the group, the crowd, but when you're part of it, you realize, I'm missing out. I'm missing out because I'm just part of the group. Sometimes it's okay to be not part of the group. Yeah. So they're all right. They're okay. And they're young. Kids are young, and I think if we raise our kids and tell them to be okay, to be, religiously affirm their difference, they take pride in it, and a good pride in it. Yeah. Even though it might be difficult at times with scheduling things. That's the hardest part, I think, is scheduling things. Around our calendar, it's hard. It's very difficult. I know people's with days off, the workers, I think that's another reason why a lot of them went to the new calendar here in America, because people would get days off. At the steel mills, you had the 25th off, not the 7th, so it was always it was just easier. Yeah. Well, but you have to take it. It's not just right.
They've already paid me for Christmas.
Right. Correct. That's what I meant. Yeah.
Like you.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I never found that to be a problem either, because once again, I was fortunate. My employer was like, "You're not taking your day off?" Oh, yes, I am. On the 7th. And they were quite aware of.
Here in our town, it's kind of historically enough Orthodox here. People are kind of, they don't understand it. Everyone calls it Russian Christmas. I remember, you celebrate Russian Christmas. Well, it's okay. Yeah, it's Russian Christmas. Yeah, whatever. So they understand it. There's been enough Orthodox people come to these schools and these employers that they know. Go to like where I was raised in Arizona. It's like, what? Try to explain it to someone out there. It's much different. Yeah. Here, when you had the Carpatho Russians, the Ukrainians, and the Russians all celebrating, the Serbians all celebrated on the same day. Here, there was enough of them that people knew about it. Yeah. So.
I have a question. So this is new to me, the whole calendar. So my family's always on the Gregorian calendar for Christmas.
Yes.
So with fasting, what do you do? Do you just, if you're invited over their house, do you break your fast and call attention to yourself? Because a lot of priests will say you never want to call attention to yourself. So if you're invited over to someone's house, just make the sign of cross, eat what's in front of you.
Did your family fast during the?
Some of them do, and some of them don't.
Yeah.
So
It's a mixed bag, that's what I thought,
I'm
yeah.
thinking about, oh my God, like
Yeah.
what, you know, this is going to be a disaster.
Really?
So, yeah, how do you do that? Because we typically do a strict fast.
Eat what they put in front of you, but you don't have to eat a lot.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
Right? Keep it, or just fast on the new calendar and celebrate it with your family. But I would expect you to be here on our calendar for the feast day, right?
My husband's being, well, actually my husband, but at some point in my family, very little folks who are, they're all Catholic. So we joined an old calendar church. So we still celebrated Christmas with our family.
Yeah.
And I don't remember ever not being able to fast in some way at least, I never ate meat, I don't think. But, and it was not a big one over there, if I filled my plate with, potatoes and salad and whatever, and I didn't eat the meat, I don't think anyone ever did this. I think it's possible.
Let's just face it, a lot of us do a terrible job of fasting to begin with, right? Right? And so we should be doing this as a spiritual tool. Like I'm not the priest going to tell you not to fast. We need to fast. But we shouldn't put that above charity. We shouldn't put that above our family. For one day, if you got that on your conscience, let's come to confession and we'll take care of that, okay? But I have lots of non-Orthodox family. When we lived near them, we would go and celebrate the 25th with them. It was often in a secular manner, but we spent time with family. That's nothing wrong with that. Families are important. But we also knew that the 7th was coming, and then we were going to spiritualize that day. That was going to be the day, that we really got in touch with our faith, So I think that's a good, I would say, pastoral way of approaching it. Yeah. Go celebrate. Family's important. Yeah, family's important. Yeah. So, yeah, good question. Thanks. Yeah, we don't have to make one day, of celebrating with our family. Yeah. So okay, well, you guys are quiet today, so we'll end early.
This has been interesting.
Yeah.
Good.
So 13 days. You have to get real good at math in our church. Especially when it ends at the end of the month and you have to add, and you don't know if it's a 30 days or 31 days in the month. Yeah. We have really good calendars upstairs that have both dates on it for each day. So I'd suggest you get used to it. Yeah.
Okay, what?
Yeah.
It does confuse me. And then I get the daily reading
Uh-huh.
from the new calendar, and I'm like, okay, and then I go follow
Yeah.
what's up the one for today.
This is the biggest tragedy of it, is that we do have we're not all united in our, it does kind of show us a kind of a lack of unity outside of the Orthodox walls, the people that don't understand the concept of this, that we are all, the reason this is possible is because we have autonomy. We're not a Roman Catholic Church with one that says, this is how it's got to be, and you're going to do it. We have different jurisdictions that have autonomy throughout the world, and so they can make these choices. It's not a dogmatic thing, and so, it's a good thing, but it also shows a little bit of this is a big decision that was made, and it shows our lack of clearly being able to celebrate spiritually together. This is what the calendar has always been. The parish has always lived their life on the calendar, right? Especially in the neighborhood. When everyone lived by the neighborhood, they knew what was going on, and the bells rang, and what feast day was, because that was the rhythm of life, especially in rural places. The church was the center of the community, and the calendar told the church what to do. Now it's different, especially since we're spread out, since we have a plurality of calendars now. So it's tough. We have to be charitable in all things on this thing. But I do think that we should, if you come to our parish, and many of you have, just do the best you can when you have family outside that are maybe in this, celebrating something different. But you got to make a commitment to your parish, and this is what we do. And I think you'll be blessed for it. making that commitment and maybe doing something that's a little bit more difficult than your normal. You'll be blessed for it. And you'll see that, being different's good. It has its benefits, it's spiritually speaking. It's not, Christmas, again, because it always comes down to Christmas. How many Christmases did I go through? I had to go to 5 different houses. How many of you do the same? Oh, yes. And you end up and you got nothing out of it but headache and trying to please people. So, and when I can celebrate Christmas without having to do all that, oh, what a blessing. I can just go to church, pray, receive communion, come home, have a really big meal, and enjoy my family. There's nothing better than that for Christmas, I promise you. Okay? No. Okay, so we'll finish up. Let's pray. Surely meet the blessing that Theotokos, ever blessed and most blameless, Mother of our God, more honorable than the cherubim, beyond compare, more glorious than the seraphim, who without corruption gave his spirit to God the Word, the very Theotokos, thee do we magnify. Glory to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, both now and ever, and unto the ages of ages. Amen. Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy. O Lord, bless. God is with us by his grace and his love for mankind, always now and ever, into the ages of ages.